And welcome to this week's first IG Live. I am so excited to be talking to Kyle Casey Chu and Andrew W. Shaffer. They are the authors of this new book, What Kind of Queen? And it is a royal biography of drag queen and activist José Sarria. And if you haven't entered this week's giveaway, we are doing a special Pride Month giveaway, so be sure to check that out after you've enjoyed our interview. And stay tuned because we have another interview coming up at 2 o'clock Eastern. That's 11 o'clock Pacific time. And so you're going to want to make sure to watch that. Every Thursday, usually at 2 o'clock Eastern, but watch the announcements because sometimes, like today, we get to have two different interviews. Hi.
Hello.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, and I think Andrew is here as well, so he'll be getting on in just a minute. I'm so excited to talk to you about your book. It's really wonderful. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you
Hi.
both for joining me and taking the time today. Maybe we could just start off with some introductions and hear a little bit about your story. I don't know who, and maybe Kyle, if you want to start, just introduce yourself and tell us how you came to be a children's book author.
And my name is Kyle Casey Chu, aka Panda Dulce, the drag queen. I'm a San Franciscan drag queen and one of the founders of Drag Story Hour. I used to be a social worker and a youth worker and always wrote on the side. And so becoming a children's author was a way for me to combine my drag and my youth work and love of literature.
Love it. Andrew, how about you?
I'm Andrew W. Shaffer. Also live here in San Francisco and been friends with Kyle for 15-ish years. I don't know.
It's been 15 years. That's so long.
Long enough that we've lost count. My training is as a historian. So most things I've written are for like an academic audience or for a very different audience. But yeah, through friendship with Kyle, ended up working on this very exciting project, which was definitely a challenge to think of how to frame ideas in for younger minds.
I love it. And I want to get into that in a little bit, but first, a little more of your background. Kyle, like you said, you're not only an author, you're also a filmmaker, musician, of course, drag queen. And you said that one thread that runs through all of that is storytelling. Can you tell us a little more? Why is storytelling so central to what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I feel like storytelling is kind of our way of understanding ourselves in context to the world. It's, one of the oldest human traditions. It goes back to like hieroglyphs and in the cave days. And there's actually a therapeutic practice called narrative therapy, which is this understanding that we have the authorship to kind of dictate what our lives are, who we are in it, and our heroic journeys. And I think that's an important thing to model for kids.
And Andrew, could you tell us a little bit about your work as an historian? As you mentioned, you're a historian of the LGBTQ community and culture. And if I understand correctly, you helped create the first permanent LGBTQ archives in Madison. Is that right? Madison, Wisconsin. So why are you so passionate about preserving this history?
Because it's fun. Uh, It's a good time. Yeah, I did a couple of years of graduate school in University of Wisconsin, and while I was there, I worked with some folks at university, some folks in the community to gather oral history materials, to gather physical objects, and really start to build a permanent record of the LGBTQ community in Madison, Wisconsin, because there hadn't really been any organized archiving. And I think the reason why I find it so important is, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and there really weren't any. There was nothing available to me to like introduce myself to like queer culture, or I didn't really even know any like openly gay people until I was like, well into my teens and early 20s. And so for me, a lot of my earliest queer friends were historical figures, people who had been dead for decades or centuries. And so I think I I understood early like the value of holding on to these stories. And then in a previous position, I worked at the GLBT Historical Society here in San Francisco, which operates the nation's first museum of queer history and culture. And being able to see people walk in and like see themselves reflected on the walls and see like, oh, look, there's someone just like me 100 years ago living a very happy, fulfilling, complex life. I think is incredibly powerful. And so I think the power that these stories have is totally profound.
Which leads us right into your book. If you want to talk about that, what kind of queen? Tell us about the book and what was the inspiration behind it. I don't know who wants to start. Maybe
Kyle, do you want to
I
start?
like sure.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think part of it is that Andrew actually focused on José Sarria for some of his work as a researcher. But for me, when I did my first drag story, where it was at Eureka Valley Library in San Francisco, which was on José Sarria Court. And I became aware of his work around then and was curious about how this other San Franciscan queer queen of color kind of jump-started a lot of queer history that we know today, but might not know the origins of. Like he was one of the founders of one of the world's oldest and largest LGBTQ charities. He was an opera singer. He was a veteran, and I love the way that he lived so many lives and didn't just choose one track. And he just was drawn to what he was drawn to and flourished in every aspect.
Andrew, do you want to talk about why you thought he was such an important figure to highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember when I first encountered Jose Sarria, but I think he's one of these figures who has taken on the sort of like mythological almost stature. Because for, in his early life, he was super important, super visible. And then by the end of his life, a lot of people had kind of forgotten about him. There had been whole new waves of generations of activists, of people who were much more visible and much more well known. So by the time I started learning some of this history, Jose Sarria was already kind of like passe and largely unremembered. And so I think as I started to learn more about him and the incredible impact he had, not only on like specific people and organizations, but really just reshaping the way that we think about ourselves, the way we interact with our community, I think was really important. And it's been Kyle knows this, it's been a mission and a passion to bore all of my friends to death with stories about Jose Sarria. So it was nice to have the opportunity to bore a new audience with more stories of Jose. 'Cause I think there's a lot of lessons there, but I think it's also he's just such an important figure in really thinking through or really understanding how our community has sort of taken shape over the last half century or more, creating a lot of the things that we inhabit now.
Could you maybe give us I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, class is in session with Andrew, and we love it. And like one of the things that we learned, or that I learned through this project, and through Andrew, was that Jose helped crystallize the idea of a we and of a queer community. Because before then, such an idea didn't exist. It was, largely tied to identity, but the aspect of having a lot of people together and being this thing in solidarity with each other was a thing that he kind of fomented.
But you had mentioned earlier about trying to find the way into writing about this story for kids. And one of the things that I love about this book, it has this very kind of dreamy, kind of fairy tale like quality to it, even when you're talking about things that are really difficult. But how did you come up with this way of, let me show the beginning, this way of telling his story? I love that.
I love that spread.
Yes.
Yeah, and you did a great job.
So Andrew, do you maybe want to talk about that or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think reading a lot of the documented evidence from Jose's life. He gave oral histories when he was alive. There's one book about him. There's one documentary. There is a little bit, as well as just like his people reminiscing about him. And I think the way he lived his life was very theatrical, was very fantastical. I mean, this is the kind of person who declares himself an empress, and then takes it so seriously that he creates an empire. So I think his life already was very easy to translate into a fairy tale because he did kind of live a fairy tale life. I mean, he lived at his imperial residence, which was just an apartment off of Alamo Square. He had his whole imperial court. He innately drew out a lot of these themes, and I think that gave us an easy way to make it accessible for kids who, when we're digging into, like, 1960s and 1970s police brutality, it's kind of, there's a lot of moving pieces there that might not be as easily to translate into a children's book, but the framework of fantasy, or the framework of, kings and queens, like, those are things that kids are used to reading about. So it made it really easy to translate a lot of these complex adult ideas into things that kids are already, like, well versed in thinking about.
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, I just wanted to add to that too, that with his oral histories and his fantastical way of telling his own life story, he like talked about how he was descended from Spanish royalty, and
Mhm.
had a lot of tales of his past and his origin and where he would be headed. And I think we agreed very early on that we wanted to capture that, and we wanted to tell the story as he would have told it and would have wanted his story to be told. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And to go back to what you were talking about before, about he had this real sense of we, about a
Mhm.
community. Because one of the things that comes across in the book, as of course seen in the title, is getting kids to think about what kind of queen they want to be. And a really central part of that is thinking what they're going to do to help. Like
Mhm.
what kind of reign do they want to have? So what do you want kids to take away from this book? Maybe Kyle, you want to go first?
You can be whoever you want to
Yeah.
be. Go forth and do it. Um, Also, I think, as we get older, as we get more grounded in reality, we sometimes lose touch with the sense of whimsy and fantasy and
Mhm.
possibility. Um, and, similar to the things of what we're talking about, of these like very adult or very like dark themes being boiled down to be digestible and metabolized for little kids, like don't lose sight of that hope, don't lose sight of that playfulness, and you can achieve what you want to achieve. There may be some failures along the way, like Jose was never elected when he ran for office, but as long as you pursue what you're wanting, you can become who you wish to be.
How
I
about
love
you?
that.
Yeah.
Um, I think similarly to Kyle, I think one of the takeaways from the book and from Jose's life is um, Jose was, lived a million different lives. His dream early on was to be a teacher. That never came to fruition. But he could have tried lots of different things. He worked at the World's Fair. He was in the military. He, worked in restaurants and bars. He did a lot. And I think one of the things that we try to convey in the book as well is, like, it's okay to try things, and maybe they work, maybe they don't. But I think a lot of sort of progress narratives. Yeah, there you go. There's him running for supervisor in, I think,
Yes.
61. I love that. Cindy did such a fantastic job. Our illustrator, Cindy, is just amazing. She was a delight to work with. But yeah, I think a lot of children's book narratives, or like sort of activist narratives, are like, there's a problem, and then a brave group of people stand up, and then it's fine. And I think one of the things that we're also doing a little bit in the book is complicating that narrative. Like, it's not a
Mhm.
straight linear narrative from, like, things were bad and then things got good. It's like fits and starts, and you try things, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you create things that you're never going to see the end of. But
Mhm.
you know that you're one piece of a very long story.
Right. And to focus on the journey instead of the outcome is, like, I guess, a moral within that as well.
And have you had a chance to share this book with kids? Like, what kind of reaction have you gotten from them to the book?
Yeah, so I actually did a drag story hour at my old elementary school, which is wildly full circle. Um, and they liked it. They were really engaged. And I think it really helps to have uh, colorful and mystical and illustrations that are full of movement. I think it was meant for a drag queen to tell it. And so it's innately animated. And yeah, we're really like electrified by the reception.
That's wonderful. And
Mhm.
you talked about how this is, if I understand correctly, this is the first picture book for both of you. I mean, Kyle, you have a really successful middle grade novel, but a little different doing picture book. And of course, Andrew, you're coming from academic work. So how was that process for you, trying to figure out how to tell this for a younger audience?
Yeah, I guess coming from middle grade, obviously it's more verbose, it's more prosy, and I think part of the challenge of a picture book was trying to capture the essence of a story and be as vivid as possible within an economy of language,
Mm.
and trying to focus on what would enrapture a kid. Uh, and so it took a lot of back and forth. We were like at cafes on a laptop, like sharing almond croissants and,
Mhm.
talking about what words to use, like what images to draw. But I think it helps that we have like a decade and a half year of friendship. And so, uh, yeah, it was a fun process, I think.
Yeah, what was the writing process like? So did you do most of your writing together? Did one write a draft and the other review it, or how did that happen?
I think I So, okay, so Andrew had all of the historical knowledge, and so
Right.
we did a download session, and then I think tried to parse that out, and I think I did an outline, and
Mhm.
we kind of used that as to scaffold the rest.
Mm.
And that part we did together, and down to the dedication and the afterward. And Andrew did a really great job at, wait, what do we call it? The author's note that ties the story and grounds it into a historical timeline at the end.
Yes, I love that, and I love having like the actual
Mhm.
pictures of him at the back. I don't know. For me, that the author's note and timeline are always some of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah.
So Kyle, did you know much about him before you started? Before Andrew was telling you about him, or was this all pretty new to you also?
So I wrote about Jose before because in the Bay Area at the Oka Museum of California, they did an exhibit on the Imperial Court, and I covered it
Mm.
as a journalist for Vice. Um, and so I had an overview, and this was in like 2017. And so I was aware of his work, but hadn't delved into it as deeply as for this project. And so it gave an excuse for Andrew and I to go on walks and chat about it. Um, and also, it was a unique challenge to boil it down for this audience. And
Mm.
so I think came to a new like understanding and appreciation of Jose and his contributions through that.
Right. And for Andrew, was it hard for you because you did know so much background? Was it hard to decide what pieces to put in or things that you especially wanted to highlight?
Yeah, there was a lot that we decided, like, for various reasons, I really want to include this, but it's too. We would need so much more space to include it, or it's too
Mhm.
complicated, or we can't find language that will like help
Mhm.
a 5-year-old understand what we're trying to convey,
Mhm.
within an economical space. You can definitely tell, my training as a historian, I write in very long sentences and paragraphs, and you can see you can see my contributions pretty clearly on everything that's very verbose. So I think it was hard to condense some of those things, but I think it was also kind of a fun challenge to think through what are the beats that are going to make sense, that are going to be really resonant for kids, and we tried to. Sneak in a few little like Easter eggs or things for people who knew Jose, because there is still a large community of people who knew and love Jose and are very dedicated to telling his story, and we wanted them to get something out of this as well. So some of the illustrations, we snuck in things that are a kid's gonna just like miss over, but like we included Jimmy, who was Jose's
Yeah.
long lost love. Yeah,
This one.
yeah, that's Jimmy. He was his man for several years. And then Saul Stewman, who's also in that photo. We didn't include it because it didn't really make sense. Yeah, that he was the
Mhm.
owner of the Black Cat Cafe, and actually took in the 60s had a case against the Supreme Court that basically created the legal framework in which gay bars can exist.
Mm.
And that was, didn't really make sense for a kid book to include all of that, but we at least wanted to give him a little shout out there because he was such an important and also, largely forgotten figure in our history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a part of that like curation too for a kid audience was, you know, Jose, wasn't he instrumental in helping to liberate like a concentration camp during World War II? And so we didn't want to go into explaining like Nazis, all this stuff. And
Right.
so we just said he fought forces of evil abroad, for
Hmm.
example. And for uh, there were cops who were doing raids of gay bars and publicly outing people afterwards, and that was a whole can of worms that we didn't really know how to boil down in like
Hmm.
an economy of space. And so we said, you know, they were queens were being scared into hiding their fabulousness, right? And so
Mhm.
these are kind of like euphemistic like ways around, or but getting to the point of what's going on at the
Right.
same time.
Right, getting to the kind of the essence of it, but
Mhm.
in a
Hmm.
way that kids can understand. I was just going to say, as far as like Easter eggs, here's
Yeah.
one of my favorite is that here watching the news, and also let me see, one of my favorite spreads was this one where you
Hmm.
see, I mean, which is just kind of influences. I mean, shows the influence that he had, and the reason we need his story because I think most of us are more familiar with some of the other figures in this, like
Hmm.
say, like Harvey
Mhm.
Milk, but I had never heard of Jose before I picked up this book, so
Hmm.
it's really wonderful. I wanted to because I'm just looking, I don't want to take up any more of your time than I want to be respectful of that. But I do want to ask about the Drag Queen Story Hour. If you could tell us a little bit about that, because I just read a mention that you had in an interview where you were talking about it, that you really wanted to make more queer spaces outside of nightlife, especially including kids and youth. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So historically, a lot of queer spaces have been in nightlife because that was where it was safest to congregate, or they kind of needed to because of the law. And I think as a result, a lot of queer culture is centered around nightlife as well, which is great. We love our bars. But Andrew and I are old ladies. I am a drag grandma. We like to walk around a park and read books. So I'm not the type of person to death drop at a bar at 2 a.m. And so Michelle T, who's like a renowned writer and author, had kids, and she realized that all of the spaces where she would take her kids weren't necessarily like explicitly queer welcoming or
Mm.
queer coded spaces, and so she decided to bring drag queens to libraries and bookstores to entertain kids, and that was the idea behind it. And so I think underneath that is this idea of, you know, can queer people exist in public space, and what does that look like? And so I love the idea of creating a space that is welcoming for youth and for families and also is explicitly queer. Um, and, that led to us writing this children's book and, wanting to carve out more spaces like that.
I love that. And so now that you have written this book together, do you think that are you planning to write more together, or do you have other projects, separate projects that you'd like to kind of give a shout out to wrap up?
Well, we've talked about maybe centering another historical figure. Maybe it's, in a couple of walks, we'll come up with something.
Yeah.
Uh, But yeah, I guess besides that, I have the sequel to The Queen Bees of Tybee County coming out in October. And that's all I have on my docket so far. And I've promised Andrew that I'm going to rest a little bit. And so uh
That's important.
yeah, I'm trying to do good by that promise. So yes.
Kyle's also been saying that for like 5 years, so
I
we'll see.
have. I have. It's true. Call me out.
Kyle likes to stay busy.
How about you, Andrew?
No big new projects on the horizons for me at the moment. But yeah, I think this was such a fun way to tell the story,
Mhm.
and a fun, I think, framework to utilize. That I would love to do something similar again. I think not only for the kids, I think both Kyle and I went into this really thinking like, what's the book we wish we had, growing
Mhm.
up, when we were, trying on dresses and wigs, surreptitiously in mom's closet. But I think it's also some of the feedback or some of the reactions of guys from parents who are like, think this is great because now I have like a framework and like something I can share with my kid who's like, you know, doing all sorts of fun gender things at like an early age, and I think it's
Mhm.
really beautiful for parents to have something that's easy to share with their kids. Yeah, I think that's been beautiful. So yeah, definitely would love to do similar projects in the future.
Well, I hope you do because this is such a wonderful book. And thank you both for taking the time to talk with me today and for all that you do. And whenever you do get to the after you have a rest, get to more projects, we will definitely share about them in our stories. So thank you both for being here today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you for watching. If you have time, tune in about a half an hour. I have another interview coming up. And of course, we'll be here next week as well. So thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.